So people have changed, and it didn't used to be this way. Things have changed so dramatically just in the last few years. And it's frightening and shocking, and it's terrifying. Even when walking in the city or driving on the highway, I notice a profound difference. People also just can't have a normal conversation anymore. And there's a general low trust in the culture. It's almost as if a mind virus has infected many people. Of course, not everyone, but a good proportion of people seem to be infected. And there's a bifurcation, a split in the society. And as societal narcissism and dysfunction takes hold, the world is being turned upside down. Now stay with me while I get into this and unpack it. So, when I'm on the highway, and I've driven quite a lot, like cross country, so that's the motorway or the highway, I notice that there's an elevated sort of road rage and a sense of entitlement on the roads. I could be driving at, close to the speed limit, and suddenly somebody will cut across in a really dangerous way, cut across lanes, or speed, or tailgate. And in one single journey, this happens many, many times, and I can see it also, when I look on the road, it's happening to other people. And this didn't used to be. When I go into the cities, I see a very, very dramatic shift and a change in people. I could be on a train or, the London Underground. I actually don't like going into the big cities anymore. I'm originally from London, so I'm very, very familiar with it, but I don't live there. I live well outside of any major city. That's by choice. And I go in when I have to, either for a particular reason, usually to see somebody. And when I travel in, I kind of dread going in, just because as soon as I get into the city, there's a really dark energy. It's horrible. It's changed. It wasn't this way. Even 5 years ago, 10 years ago, it wasn't this way at all. And there's a definite sense of disconnection between people. Now, London isn't a place where people sort of are very, very chatty, let's say on trains or, on the transport. But still there's a difference. It's like there's this lowered level of trust and almost suspicion and disconnection between people. And, it's palpable. You can feel it. There's an increase in strange behaviours, mental health issues, but it's pervasive. It isn't like, the occasional isolated incident that you'll see. It's become more of a commonplace thing. I noticed, I was just at a bus stop a while back in central London, and I was sitting, actually, in this instance, chatting with another very nice lady, and this man kept coming up to us and bothering us, and, it was a bit scary, it was unpleasant. And these types of things, they're quite commonplace, where they didn't used to be. What I find is that, just in general, this is also, when I speak to people, whether it's acquaintances, friends, the wider kind of environment, I see that there's a loss of moral compass. There's no due north anymore. And, that compass pin is just rotating like crazy. I see an increase, we see it in the news, an increase in violence, and strange behaviours, like an increase in hedonism, in, unpleasant things. And part of that, it feels like family values have shifted, like the family is no longer supported. And there's an attitude of, promiscuity, and that it's okay to use other people in relationships. And that can be across the board. It can be, in romantic relationships. It could be in friendships. It could be in business partnerships. There's this loss of trust and a loss of due north. Like, as I say, it's like a degradation in the culture to a level of low trust. And lack of ethics, lack of decency. And I see, particularly in the area, let's talk a little bit about, within romantic connections and particularly the family unit, there's this kind of hedonism, this promiscuity, and an attitude that it's somehow okay to take advantage of other people, and an unwillingness to commit with a romantic partner. People just don't seem to want to commit. Also, polyamory and so-called open relationships are on a massive rise, they're on an increase. And this obviously is a complex area with nuances, and I don't want to be judgmental towards anyone, but this direction, this general trend and direction, is not a positive thing. It's not elevating us. It's not elevating our communities. It's actually not progressive. It's regressive. It takes us backwards. And that's a huge change in people and their behaviour. I feel like my own experience of dating is that it's like this. It's this a kind of a abusing attitude, and I don't appreciate it. To be honest, I'm almost at the verge of giving up, and I won't give up, but I feel like it sometimes. And a lack of willingness to just commit. And sometimes people say that they're willing to commit, but actually when push comes to shove, you see that they have no intention of it whatsoever. And it's commonplace. And it's commonplace also, in not just in the very, in the younger people. It's commonplace among older singles who maybe have had a previous relationship or marriage, and now they're, back in the dating pool. And this isn't what you really expect of responsible adults. It's that family disconnect, and that it's somehow okay, normal. It's been normalized, promiscuity, open relationships, polyamory. It's on a massive rise, and it's been normalized. Now, I'm very interested in intentional community and intentional living, and I've explored those spaces, and I've stayed in intentional communities for that reason. I appreciate how important community is, and so it's been an area that I've explored. I will talk about this more like another time, because it's a very important subject and a very interesting one. But in that space of intentional communities and alternative lifestyles that seek to improve things and seek to elevate, I've noticed that polyamory and open relationships are increasing and they're normalized. And this is something that I worry about it, but I feel sad about it. It makes me sad. And, I've had personal experience of this where I've gone into these spaces, and it's almost like I'm on the defensive. I say who I am outright. I say I'm very monogamous. I believe in monogamy. I believe in, more traditional, family environment, let's call it. And, there are reasons for that. And somehow it's almost flipped around, like there's something not normal with me. Like, like I'm placed on the defensive now. I'm very happy to speak up and explain my perspective. And so that isn't the issue. But the fact that so many, even people who are monogamous, seem to kind of accept that open relationships and polyamory in their midst, that's definitely a shift. And I don't think it's a positive shift. I don't feel that it creates stability in people's lives, and I don't really think it's supportive of children and bringing up children in a healthy and wholesome way. So, this is a real shame, and I'm sad to see that shift. Again, more to be said on the subject, because it's complex, and I think it needs more expansion. But in general, that marks a huge shift in human beings, and the way they're relating to each other. Beyond that, I see an increase in what I call mean spirit. And another word for that would be narcissism, or I don't necessarily mean like clinically diagnosed narcissism. I just mean those narcissistic types of traits. And there's an increase without a shadow of a doubt in societal narcissism and those mean-spirited traits in people. Selfishness, abusive behaviours, things that would not have been seen as decent in the past, or at least wouldn't have been socially accepted in the past. It's all coming up to the surface. It's all out in the open now. And I think there is I do feel that there's a negative change, a shift in people acceptably being this way. People seem to lack identity. Maybe they don't know who they are anymore. There are many reasons for this. I can empathise, but I feel that those of us who do wish to connect with other people, it becomes very difficult. Even friends will turn on each other and will betray each other. And, finding genuine friendships is so hard, many of us try to find like-minded people, but I can testify to the fact that it isn't easy at all. And there also seems to be this a tendency to want to find scapegoats to blame for everything that's wrong in the world. So there's this spirit of hate and aggression that's been riled up in the community in the wider sense. And, people have turned quite aggressive and quite nasty. I feel that this shift, this huge change in people, although it's been going on for a long time, it really happened in a big way around 5 years ago with the onset of the COVID lockdowns and the so-called pandemic. The real problem, though, was not the physical virus or a physical pandemic. Rather, the real pandemic seems to have been something else. I feel that it's really been a mind virus that seems to have taken over people, and societal narcissism has become a real problem. It almost seems that a cloud of dark energy has covered humanity in a way. I know this sounds a bit woo, but that's just the sense that I get, as there's been this increase of mean-spiritedness and just an increase of narcissistic behaviours. Again, I'm not talking about clinical narcissism or some kind of diagnosis, just the actual traits that people are functioning from, and this increased very selfish and abusive behaviour that seems to be on the rise, together with hatred and rage and anger. So again, these negative traits that are on the increase. On the other side, though, of the divide are people who are holding positive values and are amplifying the positivity. And this is the nature of the bifurcation, this split. I don't think it's, although, there may be a political element to it, but it's not really about left or right side of politics. Is within each party or system, there is this split, and the negativity and the positivity as well can lie within each of these. It is not really about parties or that type of division. Now, when it comes to the cause of this, this huge change, I feel like when it comes to causes, I think there are two things that stand out that come to mind. One is the lockdowns, together with the injections that were given. And a different category is the social media. Now, these things may not be exactly root causes, but they're kind of catalysts. Okay, these amplified maybe pre-existing issues and problems. So when it comes to the lockdowns, in some places there were very heavy, very draconian lockdowns. In the UK, we had this for a prolonged period of time, And the situation brought about isolation, anxiety, stress for people. Human beings are social. We're social beings. Locking people down and separating them from others, and from social interaction, it does have a damaging effect. And the whole situation where people were really terrified, this is not a positive thing. The lockdowns also, and the whole so-called pandemic, it also had economic outcomes that were very negative. And so I think society is paying the price for those lockdowns and also the lies. Now, when it came to light that things were not handled in the right way, and that really people were lied to by politicians, by leaders, that betrayal causes mistrust, distrust, and that also has a very strong impact on society, where people have the rug pulled from under them. So this also, I think, has caused a change in people. Now, when it comes to the actual injections, those injections, I believe, have very negative side effects, very impactful side effects, and of course, people who took it, it would have had potential physical side effects that also affect people's well-being, their wellness, and also the impact of that can be mental health issues. So I think the combination of the injections and the lockdowns and the lies and the manipulation and the control, I have to say that as well, there was a control element. I think that has caused and brought to the surface these really negative elements. It's driven a real cultural shift that is, that has been very problematic. Now, the other, cause or catalyst, let's call it, is I think the social media. Now, I'm a techie person. I like and appreciate technology, and I believe it can truly serve and help us. But at the moment, the way that the media is geared, it's very corrupt, and it's causing many problems. Free speech on the media is used for manipulation and lies. The algorithms seem to reward shock content, clickbaiting, and just content that actually divides people and really rabble-rouses. And the bots and the algorithms seem to be generating a kind of extremism. They certainly are not rewarding truth sayers and truth speakers who are coming with a voice of reason and peace. And it seems to be roping people in and causing anxiety, anger, and a build-up of rage, and it's very divisive. It's unhealthy, I think, and both for individuals and the wider sense, the wider community. But having said this, human beings are also responsible. We're responsible for ourselves, and we have to take responsibility to regulate this and to self-manage. Whilst I say that, the rabble-rousing on the social media is also sparking this anger and the mean-spiritedness that I've been talking about. And this is really rising in human beings. I think it's not maybe a root cause, but it's certainly an amplifier and a catalyst of this problem. The regular legacy media isn't much better, and in many ways it's worse, at least in terms of the fact that it's loaded with propaganda and not really revealing the truth. There's a lack of transparency there, and so people no longer trust that traditional legacy media. Now, beyond all of this, I believe that there's also something spiritual going on, since this divide, the bifurcation, is increasing, and a lot of what we see doesn't entirely make sense. There's this insanity coming up, more and more craziness, and the social divide is happening. But at the same time, things are also rising to the surface and coming to light, and the truth and the corruption is being revealed. So yeah, there's a lot going on despite the negativity. I do believe, I'm very optimistic that ultimately it will lead to something positive. You know, I'm really a believer that there's always a positive way forward. So, you know, even though I've said some negative things, it's never really about doom and gloom. I think there is a really positive path, both individually and collectively, that we can take. When it comes to, you know, the whole COVID situation and the so-called pandemic, I feel like, you know, being aware of that, understanding it, and understanding that, you know, we shouldn't always do what we're told, and that we do have to be extremely discerning and think for ourselves, and we can also look for solutions and ways to heal from, you know, the past and from things that have happened. Now, when it comes to the social media and just the media in general, I think we can switch off the television completely. I mean, I don't own a TV and haven't done for many years. And when it comes to the social media, just being extremely discerning and turning the volume down and being very careful, you know, not to engage and not to support toxic and hateful and narcissistic content, not to support manipulation and divisive content. And, you know, and I think also both through the social media, but also just, you know, in general, even if it's very hard to find like-minded people, I think it's so important to do that at this time more than ever before. Even if 80% of the population are in this quite dark behavior and are, you know, either narcissistic or even abusive, even if we think, you know, even if we consider that maybe 80% are in a very negative space, I think it's so important to look for the 20% and look for other people to connect with, and to form collaborations and to support one another. And I think we shouldn't give up on that. And I certainly will never give up on that. And I know that things are difficult out there, and it's really brutal, and the world is quite insane, and we face many, many challenges. And despite that, I think there is a positive future through it. So yeah, I'm here to just chat about life with my observations and my ideas. If nothing else, maybe this serves to validate what you're experiencing, what you're seeing, what you're going through. I hope it does. I hope it, you know, also brings in, you know, some optimism, and you know, I'm optimistic though, and I really truly believe that we can find a positive way forward, that we can collaborate, that we can find others who, you know, share our goals and our intentions. Yeah, thank you so much for joining. Please like and subscribe, as hopefully this helps spread some kind-spirited content and some positivity. I want to send you all so many blessings, and I hope to see you here again soon.